Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I've faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Pioneer Mindset. Going to continue the conversation with Matt Griggs. And, if you didn't catch it on last week's episode, go ahead and listen to the first part of that. We've got a lot of value in that one. It's going to share Matt's kind of history and context. So go catch that one and then listen to this week's episode as we continue the conversation with part 2 with Matt Griggs. I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit. And it does kind of play into some of the things that you're probably going through here lately. You've been posting a lot on, Facebook, or at least that's where I've kind of been seeing you. You do some daily farm updates, which I think is awesome, and just kind of sharing everything that you got going on there. But what I've really wanted to dive into was you mentioned you were getting ready to do your line of credit renewal at the bank. And so this is the time of year when most farmers are trying to get ready through that process. And it can be pretty stressful. So I guess walk me through what that's been like for you and how you've gone about that process. And we'll just kind of go from there.
Well, probably I don't know, 6-7 years ago, I realized I had a love of creating spreadsheets. I'm a geek, and I found out, man, I love creating a spreadsheet that makes figuring all this stuff up a lot easier. Because used to, back in the day, a banker said, "Hey, I need to know what your predictions are." I was on Microsoft Word and just typing out what I think stuff is going to do. And of course, I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. And of course, I was interested in the agronomy side. I could care less about the business side, and still, I don't much like the business side. I want to be in the shop fixing stuff, getting my equipment ready. I want to be in the field growing stuff. I don't want to be, diving off into the numbers. It's not my strong suit. I'm decent at it, but it's not my strong suit. But I did find out that I loved creating spreadsheets that makes calculating all this stuff easier. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole, man. I was creating a spreadsheet to figure this out, figure that out. And then once I found out, I'm like, man, there's a lot of information here that I really need to examine because it gives me a picture of what our business looks like, where I'm being efficient, and most importantly, where I'm not being efficient, and finding out just how much farming is costing me and where's all my money going to and everything. I probably send my banker way too much information, way more than he requires, and he might not even be able to decipher some of the stuff I send them. But basically, I'm wanting to show him, hey, I know all of my numbers. I know where all my money is going. I've got a solid plan in place, and just giving them the confidence to finance me for another year. Because frankly, if I was on the opposite side of that desk, if I was a banker looking at the ag industry right now, I wouldn't loan myself any money because there's a very good chance that something goes wrong. The only way the bank's going to get their money is after the auction company comes to the farm and sells everything. So I realized that I needed to focus more on the business side, and I needed to learn all my numbers, and I need to know exactly where everything's going. And it's really allowed us to, make some cuts, streamline our operation, and more importantly, spend what money we do have, spend it in a responsible manner and not just throwing good money after bad.
Yeah, for sure. So, was that just kind of a matter of stumbling into that just one day? Like, man, I really love sitting here making spreadsheets on Excel. Or did you see some of the results that, hey, I took some time here, I solved a problem, kind of like you mentioned before, and now we're able to kind of see how this affects us positively? Or how did that kind of come about?
Well, one of the things that really opened my eyes up to was the different lease agreements that we got. And one type of crop share agreement in particular was not profitable. It was almost guaranteed to lose me money every year. We quit offering that. And that was the 75-25 share rent, where the landlord gets 25% of all income and is not responsible for any of the costs. That's almost a guaranteed loser for me. We quit offering it. Instead, I started offering 80-20 share rents where landlord gets 20% of the income and is not responsible for any inputs. So I can make a small profit generally on that. So it opens up your eyes to things that you've always done that you thought were fine. Maybe they weren't making you money, but you didn't realize how much money that they were actually losing you. Open your eyes up to things like that you can cut out or change in your operation. And another thing that, when I really started creating those spreadsheets, repair and maintenance is probably our biggest line item every year. And it just blew my mind every year how much money we were spending on repair and maintenance in relation to all the other categories. And, last year I said, I can't afford to be this high on repair and maintenance. And prior to that, I'd been super big on preventative maintenance because the one thing I absolutely despise, like any other farmer, is breakdown. When I go to the field, I don't want my stuff to break down. And we probably overspent on preventative maintenance. Something was half wore out, we'd replace it instead of waiting for it being almost wore out, just because I'm very anal about wanting to keep our equipment up. But we were really ultimately spending a lot of money we didn't need to spend. Last year, I went into the mindset that the only way I'm replacing it is if it is most definitely worn out, it's not going to make it the season, or if it's actually broke. And we cut about $100,000 out of our repair and maintenance bill for the year. We also got lucky. We didn't have any major, expensive breakdowns last year, but just examining each line item and where your money is going we were actually able to make a small profit last year. And a lot of it was due to a lot of the cuts that we made, becoming more efficient in our crop inputs, being more efficient in our overhead cost and only spending the money exactly where we needed to. And then, I got to throw this out there too, that, subsidy money, it also had a big effect in us actually making a profit. But for the majority of last year, I was thinking, man, we're going to be in the hole so big this year. There's no way the banker's going to renew me for next year. I'm like, even with the subsidy money, we're still going to be at a massive loss. But once I got all my spreadsheets done, got all the numbers tallied, we were in far better financial shape than I ever dreamed that we could have been, considering the year that we had.
That's awesome. And so, I just got to ask the question. Do you think you'd have been able to squeak out a profit if you hadn't devoted the time to the office, to the spreadsheets, to seeing what all their numbers are, to making a change, and really devoting a shift in your mindset to, hey, this is important. We need to focus on this?
Absolutely not. You can't make cuts to your operation if you don't know what you're spending money on. If you don't know what it's costing you, you can't cut it out. We made some pretty big changes to our corn program last year. We'd been fully traded varieties for 20 something years. And we all know what the price of corn seed is. For the vast majority of your good variety, it's going to be over $300 a bag. We don't have ground capable of yielding what $300 a bag corn can produce. So, we actually switched to mostly Roundup Ready and actually a little bit of conventional corn last year just to lower the seed cost, and it worked like a charm. This year, we're going to be planting even more conventional corn than what we did last year because I was able to get my hands on some varieties. But knowing exactly what it cost me per acre, allowed me to pencil in like, hey, this is a cut that we need to make. It really shouldn't cut my overall yield or anything, but it's going to save us money. And also thinking about corn population, most all farmers, it's been beating our head, plant maximum population for maximum yield potential. And that's gotten us $4.50 corn, or $4.30 corn now. And I figured out, hey, if I cut my planting rate by 1,000 seeds per acre, what's the chances I'm actually really going to cut my yield much? In that 1 year out of 10, when you got perfect growing conditions, I'll probably cut my yield some, but in an average year, I probably won't notice any difference in yield. But cutting my seed population 1,000 seeds per acre is going to save me a little over $4 an acre in input costs. Why am I spending that extra $4 if it's really not generating much income? And if it is generating more yield, well, it's just contributing to having, a low price. I did some figuring in the combine last fall. We were shelling corn. I was deep in my thoughts and everything. And on average, is around 93 million acres of corn grown in the U.S. If every farmer that grew corn reduced their population by 1,000 seeds per acre, it probably wouldn't have that much effect on yield, but just say it reduces the national average by 4 bushels an acre. That was going to take something like around 500,000 billion bushels of corn, or 500 million bushels of corn out of the supply line. Our carryover this year is going to be about 2 billion bushels. If we reduce that by 25%, there's probably a good chance corn's going to go up by at least 40, 50 cents a bushel. We make 4 bushels an acre less, we're actually going to be making more net profit by, if we can increase that corn price by 50 cents a bushel. Say we make 182 bushel corn at 475 versus making 186 bushel corn at 425. Why are we shooting for maximum yield? We need to be shooting for sustainable yield. We need to be shooting for profitable yield. We need to get this supply down. We're too good at our jobs. We're producing too much. We're cutting our own throats.
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe I went down a rabbit hole there, but I mean, we need to change our mindsets.
Right. Everything you talk about is everything that I completely agree with. And you talk about changing your mindset. I mean, that's ultimately why I called this Pioneer Mindset, the podcast. And we're trying to pioneer a new mindset and change the way that we do things. And so everything you talked about there is I can definitely relate to. And I can sense, just even by looking through your old Facebook post and all this stuff, that you're a very analytical person. And that probably makes up a good portion of who you are and how you operate. And I guess kind of going back to the original question here is how has this affected your line of credit renewal? I mean, it sounds like, you were able to squeak by a profit this year because you were able to, kind of analyze the numbers. Now, how has that made, obviously, going into the renewal a lot easier for you? And then being an analytical person, having all the information to back up everything that you're doing, how has that kind of changed that process or even changed the relationship with the banker?
I mean, it's made it a whole lot easier. It's given me a lot more confidence that, there's not going to be any problems with my renewal process. I can function my farm as normal going forward. I'm not having to scramble around and think, well, maybe I need to sell this piece of equipment just to get me enough operating capital just to get me by or whatever. We're able to do business as usual. I've got no worries at all that, we're not going to get funded for this year. And also, like last August, my banker calls me up like, "Hey, look, I got some big wigs down here today. They want to come by your farm." And August, they're at the end of August. I mean, we're in the midst of that drought. Crops look terrible, and I know the real reason they're coming by. They're not just wanting to shake my hand and say hi. Hey, I want to meet you. I appreciate your business. They're concerned about their investments, and having all of these numbers that I just updated the numbers earlier in the week, and I knew them on top of my head when they showed up. 3 big wigs and my local loan officer. I was able to say, "Hey, look, times are bad, but this is a plan I've got. It's working. I will be able to pay my money back, and this is exactly how I'm going to do it by telling them all those numbers that I just updated." And I mean, I'm not a banker, but I can only imagine, what a sense of relief that they had that, hey, this guy, he's up to date. He knows what he's doing, and he's got a plan going forward.
That's awesome. In your opinion, and I'm not trying to pat yourself on the back or build your ego up, but do you think that that's the way that most farmers think or operating? Especially even in your area locally, are they coming to you and maybe giving them a sigh of relief? But at the end of the day, what's the rest of their portfolio look like? What's the rest of their customers look like? Are they operating at a level that you are? Man, I'm getting real high level here, but how would that change things, even for rural America, even for farmers and ranchers, if more operated with that mindset? I feel like that would really change things.
I mean, I would say, there's still some guys that ultimately are going to go out of business just due to circumstances or past poor decisions that they can't get out of. But I know there's a lot of talk the last few years about farmer suicides, about just having the stress, being in debt and stuff. And I got to think that everybody's situation is going to be different. But I got to think that if they had a better handle on exactly what their financial structure looked like, and especially if they known all along to where maybe they could head off, a troubling trend that was leading them down the wrong road, that, there's still going to be financial hardships and stuff, but I got to think that would probably head off a big part of the stress. potentially save some farmers' lives, that they wouldn't commit suicide so their family could collect life insurance and their family wouldn't be financially ruined. And, like I said, for most people, it's not an enjoyable task sitting down and opening the books up and, getting a reality check of what you're doing wrong and what you need to change. But, ultimately, I mean, we're business owners. Yeah, we're farmers. We like to grow stuff, but I mean, we're business owners and our businesses have to succeed and you have to look at it like a business owner. I mean, everybody wants to cry out about all the big time operators, large farms, and, how they're ruining agriculture, yada, yada, yada. Well, I got to say, one thing that all these big time operators have in common is they're businessmen. They're not necessarily farmers, they're businessmen. They run their farm like a business. That's what has allowed them to get to where they're at is by treating their operation like a business. And, all of us smaller farmers, I got to say, if we treated our operations the same way, we could thrive also.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, there's last thing kind of on that relationship with the bank. Have you been able to kind of be proactive and like, hey, by the way, things don't look good. Here's updated numbers. And how do you feel like that, ahead of the line of credit renewal, ahead of, by the way, I need this tomorrow, what can you do for me? Just trying to create that relationship there and build the character side of things. How do you feel like that has ultimately changed your relationship? And you back to the comment you made, which I think was awesome, was, the fact that the bankers want to feel comfortable lending to you. So by being able to be proactive and just foster that relationship, how do you feel like that's changed their comfort level in you and your operation?
I mean, I've always had loan officers and bank people that I've always had a personal relationship with going way back when. And the one that I've got now currently, I've really worked hard because he's only in his second year in his position at the bank that I use. He took the place of somebody I've been doing business with for 15, 20 years, a long time. And so I really worked hard to, not waiting on him to contact me, trying to be proactive and contact him just so he can have that confidence. So when he goes in front of the loan committee, he can go to bat for me that, hey, we need to approve this guy. Yeah, times are tough, but if we're going to invest in anybody in agriculture right now, it needs to be this guy because he's the most safe bet out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then I think you said it best, especially when you're working with somebody new that maybe doesn't have the full context or history, haven't worked with you for the last 10, 5 years, or whatever the number is, being able to give them the information that they need to paint the picture so that way they can take it to loan committee and have confidence, right? And so I think that you said that really good there, and I can definitely appreciate that. Any other comments around, that side of things when it comes to working with the bank and what that's been like here lately to go through that process?
I mean, not really. I mean, I'd like to give a shout out to the bank that I use. It's Simmons Bank. I don't know how widespread they are. I know they're pretty common in this area, but they kind of pride themselves on being, the bank for farmers. They do a lot of financial line of credits for farm operations, and they pride themselves on it. And I've got to say, I've heard horror stories with other banks, but Simmons Bank has been just absolutely fantastic to deal with. And I've never had any concerns whatsoever about them standing behind me and financing me, even in tough times.
Well, good. That's good to hear for sure. So yeah, good shout out to them for sure. So I guess, as we kind of talk about the current challenging times in ag, and you've shared a lot on your channel, and that's what I think that, it ultimately draws me to your channel, draws a lot of other people, and it's educational, but then it's also relatable to everything that you're going through and that every other farmer or rancher is kind of going through too, right? So I guess what's your different perspectives on the challenging times right now? I mean, I know we kind of touched on a lot of that, like we just talked about, but how do you foresee some of these different things playing out? What can people do, or what at the end of the day drives you to share everything that you're going through as well?
I don't know. I mean, we're in a down cycle of agriculture. This isn't the first one I've gone through, and Lord willing, it won't be the last one I go through. But when you're in the midst of that trough, the downside, it's really tough to see how you're ever going to climb that hill. How is agriculture ever going to be good again? It's really tough to see. And ever since COVID, the trend in agriculture has been down. It seems like every year has been tougher and tougher to find a profit. I mean, a lot of that's due to grain prices. A lot of it's due to input prices. And stuff, so, for us, it's been weather. In the past, I've experienced droughts before. 2025 was not my first experience in drought, but what 2025 was my first experience was having a major devastating drought and having low prices. Normally you have a drought, prices are going to be good. So we had a double whammy last year. And when you're in the midst of that year, it's just really tough to look forward and see the path forward on how things are going to get better. Even though I know that they will, this agriculture has always been cyclical. It's just about surviving this tough time. And then when times are good, preparing ourselves for that next down cycle because it will come. We're very fortunate in that we've only got one equipment loan, and actually we made our last payment on that equipment loan last year. So we have no more equipment that we're having to pay for. I think we got like 5 or 6 years left on a payment for our last grain bin, and then that's done. I've got another loan where I've got 3 more payments on it when I actually had to buy out my sister for her share of the farm because my dad passed away without a will. That's going to be off the books. And then after that, the only thing I'll have is my annual operating line of credit, which I should be able to pay off every year. And then we've got a one long-term loan for the land. So we're going to be pretty dang close to debt free. And as it is, we don't have a huge debt load right now anyway. So that's what's really helped us remain financially solvent is if we don't have the cash to buy equipment, unless it's an emergency, we're just not going to buy it. We're going to make do with what we have. But, just trying to see how the good times are going to come again. It's really tough when we're in the midst of a bad stretch. I know they're going to come, but I don't think they're going to come in 2026. Maybe 2027. I don't know. It's just really, really hard to predict.
Yeah, for sure. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily just farmers, but I think as human beings, we just get so caught up in the here and now, whether it's good times or bad, we're just caught up, if it's bad, we're caught up in the suck fest. It's always going to be that way. And, we just kind of focus on that. Or like you said, good times, back to probably some good years in farming, especially maybe if you're a young guy that hasn't been through those cycles, we generally get caught up. Well, these times are good. This $5, $6 corn's going to last a few years. We just get caught up in the here and now.
Exactly. And, there's been several times in my career that corn's gotten up there, maybe $6, $7. I'm like, I think we finally hit a new plateau. Corn's never going to go below $5 again. I've said that to myself several times before. Well, here we are. Maybe it has hit a new plateau and it's maybe not going to get below $4, but it's still that plateau is not where we need it to be yet.
Right, for sure. And so, like I said, with that mindset, I'm curious for you, kind of last thing on maybe some of these hard times, but, when we're going through challenging times, what's kind of your mindset? How does it bleed over sometimes into even like your personal relationships, family balance? Sometimes on Pioneer Mindset and Pioneer Farm, when you talk about how the core 4 areas of our life, body, being, balance, and business, how they're all kind of intertwined and intermingled, and challenging times in each of those is going to affect the other areas. So how do you feel like, challenging times in farming and in the business, how has that affected, whether it be positive or even negative, the other areas of your life, but then how have you been able to kind of stay steadfast in that as well?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm not going to say that it hasn't affected my personal life. It hasn't affected, other parts of my life because it absolutely has. Kelly and I were just blessed with our first grandson about 2 weeks ago. My nickname has already been named, and it's not Grandpa. It's Grumps. My new nickname is Grumps because I'm always grumpy all the time. Why I'm always grumpy all the time? Because all I do is work, and I work to basically not make any money. That's why I'm grumpy all the time. So, it absolutely does affect all aspects of your life. But there are 2 things going for me that help me out. One, my wife Kelly works out here on the farm with me. She lives it, so she doesn't necessarily, go off to another job, have a great day at work, and then come home all happy. And then I come home and I'm all grumpy because I had a terrible day on the farm. We both experience the highs and lows together. So I'm not going to say we don't have any friction in our marriage because every marriage has got friction, but us working together has eliminated, a potential source of friction of having 2 diametrically opposed lives with different experiences. And then the other thing is that, and I still have to remind myself of this every year is, I've already touched on my faith, just to have the faith that everything will turn out. When we're in the midst of that 84-day drought and I'm watching my crops just slowly wither away, it's the worst feeling in the world. But I mentally had to remind myself that have faith that everything is going to turn out okay. And all the major droughts that we've had, I've reminded myself of that. And then when I do that, to turn everything over to the Lord, turn everything that I can't control over to the Lord, it's like all that weight on my shoulders that's just been slowly piling up over the course of the drought, it's gone. And it gives me a new outlook on life. And I don't know why I keep waiting so long to turn things over to the Lord. The things that I can't control, there's no sense in worrying about the weather. I can't control it. There's really no sense in worrying about prices. I can't control it. I'm only going to focus on the things that I actually can directly control, because that takes all my time just focusing on that, and not worry about the stuff that I can't control, because it's absolutely pointless, and all it's going to do is negatively affect me. But like I said, that's something I have to actively do myself every single day, because it's my nature to worry about all the things that I can't control. So, I'm still evolving as a person. Now, I don't know if I'll ever be where I need to be, but having that faith has been huge for me, and it's really gotten me through some tough times.
Right, right. No, that's awesome. And so I guess that kind of brings me to the last kind of segment or area that I like to touch on. If you don't mind, you'll talk about you share a lot, and you guys have grown the social media side of things. I think you had pretty good YouTube presence there. On Acres TV, some of those different things. So explain how that kind of came about, and then kind of what's your whole philosophy behind that, and how do you even have the time to share all this stuff? I just kind of curious on how that's kind of about, and how big a part of your life that actually is for you guys.
It's kind of evolved. I've always felt like I kind of had a calling, and Kelly's felt the same way. There's this huge misconception of agriculture out there in the world. I mean, every time we get on Facebook or watch the news, we're bombarded by advertisements for lawsuits about Roundup and Paraquat, about how awful these chemicals are, and that, there's a lot of propaganda that farmers are drenching their soil and or drenching their crops in poisons and all that kind of stuff. And that's a pretty loud voice out there that most everybody is not getting the opposite perspective. So, we've always felt like it was our goal to educate the public on what we do and why we do it, and how we're not evil, and we're some of the greatest environmentalists out there. We care about the environment because it's our livelihood. And, we started out on Facebook 17, 18 years ago, just trying to share our lives, what happened. And then about, I think 2016, I'd seen like harvest videos on YouTube of other guys, showing their, harvesting the crop, and it was set to a cool song and all that kind of stuff. Like, hey, I want to do that. So Kelly actually got me a drone for my birthday. And in 2016, we created our own harvest video. And I was strictly putting it on YouTube just so 20, 30 years from now, I could look back and see what our equipment looked like. I mean, it was more about documenting and preserving it for my own accord, because we've got a ton of history out on this farm, but there's very, very few photographs surviving of the cotton gin or us in the field or anything like that. And it's something that I really hate, because I'd love to go back and look at that kind of stuff. So I made it my goal that, hey, the next generations past me, they're going to be able to see what things were like, in 2016. So, I started making harvest videos set to what I thought was a cool song, whatever. And then 2017, Kelly got an email from a casting company for, they're wanting to do a reality TV series about multi-generational farms. And it was actually picked up by the History Channel. We had a camera crew show up for 3 days in 2017 to film a sizzle reel, and we were one of the applicants, and they wound up picking us. And like I said, the show was picked up by the History Channel. The executive producer of that show, we found out, was Tom Beers, who was the executive producer for Deadliest Catch, Ice Road Truckers. I mean, we're talking about a big name in Hollywood, and we didn't understand what we were getting ourselves into. And then camera crew showed up for the long haul, April 2018, and they were with us for 8 months. They were riding in the tractor with me every single day. And Kelly, I mean, they were filming every aspect of our life. But the TV show I thought turned out really good. It was really honest about who we are. But the best thing about that show is that I got an 8-month tutorial from professional filmmakers about operating a camera, about telling a story. And I mean, that's something people pay thousands of dollars to get. And I actually got paid to get that lesson because the whole time that we weren't actually filming, but the guys were in the cabin with me, I was, asking about camera settings and just everything I needed to know. And, that really gave me the information I needed going forward for the YouTube channel. And then TV show only lasted 1 year. And then 2020, I started making just a couple more YouTube videos, but nothing big time. But then I had my combine accident where I was ejected out the front of the combine going down the road. And I really felt strongly driven to share about my faith and how, the Lord had brought me through it and kept me alive for another day when there was absolutely no reason I should be alive. And that video immediately went viral. And we had just gotten monetized a couple months before by YouTube. And then I saw how much money that video made. It made me like $5,000 right from the get-go. I was like, wow, I can actually make money doing this. So we filmed the rest of our harvest. We started putting out videos and, we actually started making money from it. But our videos were geared more towards educating the public about what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. I never really gave farmers much thought, but then, we'd done the YouTube for a couple of years and, started going to farm shows, and I'd have people come up, really recognize me, and it'd be farmers saying, hey, I really like your channel. Like, I learned something off of it. And I didn't realize that was a possibility. I didn't realize that other farmers would watch me or whatever. And so I kind of started trying to incorporate, more technical stuff, more actual, the scientific part of farming to things I'd learned to help other people. So we're still trying to reach the general public. We feel like that's our main calling, but we realize that there's another segment of the population that can get benefits from our videos also. And I guess the best thing that really ever reached me, because you're right, editing and putting all this stuff out here, it's a full-time job. I mean, as soon as we get done filming this podcast here on a Saturday, I'm going to spend the rest of the afternoon trying to get 2 more videos made up for the following week. It's a full-time job. I spent an hour and a half recording a video last night. So it takes a lot of time. And there's times when I think, I don't want to sit in front of a computer. I just want to go home and sit in front of the TV. But then occasionally we get a comment that makes it all worthwhile. Like a couple of years ago, we had a comment from somebody I can't remember the country, but it was one of those third world countries in Africa. He said he really appreciated what I put out there about what we do with cover crops and soil health, because while they don't have access to the equipment that I've got, they learned a lot from our channel and they really increased the output of what they were producing for their village to actually feed their village. Because he says they didn't have access to the type of information that I was providing there. And they really increased the food production for their village. And every time I think, like, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm tired, I just want a break from it. We get a comment like that says, all this sacrifice that we're doing is worthwhile. And, then of course, YouTube, Acres TV, Facebook, it's pretty much the only thing that made me a profit this year. So, it's provided a lot of living expenses for us. It's not something we're getting rich at, but we're finally making enough to make all the effort in it worthwhile.
That's awesome. And I appreciate you sharing the entire story there. And going back to kind of that last comment there, I had Logan Hanks on the podcast, not quite a year ago as a guest and talking with him, and kind of the same thing with, their podcast. We look at this probably at first to where maybe it's a job to do, or maybe it's just something else to do. But then, really trying to look at it almost from a diversification standpoint, not to take away from all the feel goods, the purpose of actually sharing and everything that's going to come back to you, that's awesome. But, from a business standpoint, why should we not look at this as a diversification opportunity? You know what I mean? And maybe just even as a way to help, like, okay, there's a reason that we're going to be sitting in the office here this Saturday to do all this hard work when we could be doing other things. Well, it's just kind of almost retraining your mindset to part of like, this is what affects our business. This affects us, at the end of the day, our family, and kind of bringing some back to us, right? So I can appreciate the different, kind of outlet from a diversification standpoint there. And so I'm glad that you share that and don't necessarily hide it, because I know people maybe like, well, don't want to talk about like, yeah, well, we're making money off of some of the stuff. You don't always want to talk about that. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's what we're doing it for sometimes. We got to make sure that it's worth our time to do that. And so I appreciate you sharing that.
I mean, I love doing it. I love putting videos out there, but ultimately, I mean, I need to make money for my efforts, because I'm like I said, it's a full time job, and unfortunately, I've seen a lot of farm channels. Some of them I'm friends with. They're trying to diversify. They're trying to build their audience up. They spend a couple of years and they finally get monetized, but you're still really not making any money. And I mean, they put years into trying to build their channel up, and by the time they finally get their channel to where they're actually making a decent amount of money, I mean, they're burnt out on it. And it's something I've faced, and we just had to push through. Like, we're known for putting out a video every 3 days religiously. And that's what our audience has come to expect. You're younger than I am, but I remember the days before DVR when, you had a TV show that you liked. It came on at a certain time every time of the week. You better make sure you was in front of the TV to watch it. So, we try to treat our channel like a regular TV show. There's a certain time it comes on and people can count on having it. I've had so many people message me like, hey, they know exactly what days my video is going to be released at noon o'clock, and they plan their lunch break around it to watch it. I mean, it blows my mind that people are actually, look forward to our content like that. It absolutely blows my mind, but it also reminds me of what the type of influence that we can have. So I need to be very careful about what content we put out. I mean, for one thing, I don't want to waste a viewer's time. Their time's valuable. If they're going to spend time watching my video, I want to make sure that they get their time's worth. Also, I want to be careful, and I want to put out content that 10 years from now, I can look back and say, I'm proud I put out that video. It served a specific purpose. I didn't say something stupid that I'm embarrassed about now. So, we want to show everything about agriculture. I have no problems talking about the things other people don't want to talk about. I put out a video a couple of days ago talking about subsidies. I've put out multiple videos talking about subsidies. Nobody wants to talk about that. And I get roasted in the comments for it because it triggers a lot of people. But there's a lot of people out there that are not going to attack me that are really curious about how subsidies work, where their tax dollars are going to, how they're being utilized, how it's determined who gets what. And yeah, I've got to deal with some idiots online who just want to scream and shout, but we're here to educate the public about each and every aspect of our farm. We want to be known as the most transparent farm out there. We want people to feel like they can trust us because we're telling everything. We have absolutely nothing to hide on our farm. And we want the viewers to be able to trust us that when they see differing perspectives from the mainstream media, that they can recognize that, hey, the mainstream media just presented a real slanted view, but hey, I watched Griggs Farm's video about this subject. I know what the actual truth is. I can now form my own educated opinion because I know what the actual truth is.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess two things I want to compliment you on or commend you, I guess, is, one, the consistency. I think that's awesome. The fact that a guy can build in that consistency, and that's probably helped your channel probably more than a lot of things, is just the consistency. But then two, being intentional about it, not being like, well, okay, I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to pump this out every 3 days, but maybe there's a few episodes that I don't care about. We're just going to pump them out. You know what I mean? So being intentional about, hey, what are we putting out? What are we showcasing? How is it helping them? Being respectful of the viewer's time, that thought process alone probably just changes the quality of the videos you put out. So awesome work there. I guess I do want to take just a couple minutes, and I do want to thank you just for all the videos put out, because making sure that that it does make an impact. Not only from a farmer's perspective that you're educating people, you're doing a good for the entire ag society there, ag industry, but for other farmers. So I guess kind of a quick little side note, personal related here. I remember a few years back that I was just kind of hanging out with the kids, I had the TV on and I had YouTube up, and I can't remember what it was. You guys' videos came up, and it intrigued me, and you guys shared a lot. And the fact that you're willing to share everything that people are going through, farmers like you are going through, yes, it's educational for the public, but it also is so relatable for other farmers out there because a lot of us farmers are very independent, are very kind of, we're out in rural America, so we're not surrounded by a lot of other people. So to see somebody else out there that's probably going through some struggles and sharing those struggles and sharing their faith also, and sharing that, maybe we're going through some hard times right now, but this guy's sharing his faith. He's having a good time and he's sharing all the positives right now. And that's such a light to a lot of other people out there. So I want to thank you for that, personally.
Yeah, no, and speaking towards that, I know me from a personal perspective. I know that being alone in a tractor for hours on end when you're going through tough times, there's a lot of bad things that can go through your mind. You feel like you're probably the only one struggling, or you think that other people might be struggling, but they're not struggling as bad as you are. And I've had quite a few people come up to me saying, that they appreciate to hear about our struggles because it makes them feel like that they're not alone in this world. They're not the only ones going through that. And just, I hate the word mental health because I'm old school. I feel like, I just need to push through it. I don't need to be concerned about mental health, but knowing that I can hopefully positively help somebody, another farmer in their, mental health to realize that they're not alone. They're not the only ones experimenting it. I'm also experiencing it and this is how I'm dealing with it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I hope that that does drive you in some way, shape, or form. But kind of the last thing here as we're talking about this is, I guess, two things. What does drive you at the end of the day? But then two, from a time management standpoint, it's always interesting looking at operations from the outside looking in. You guys probably farm a few acres, diversified. You got the channel, and you got a lot going on. You got family. You got grandkids now. So how do you find time to do it all? And when, like I said, back to that other question is what drives you to do it all as well?
What drives us is that we want to make a difference out there. We want to have a positive impact on agriculture, whether it's informing the public, helping other farmers, maybe even potentially influencing policy. Maybe there's some politicians out there that watch us. I don't know, but what drives us is we want to have a positive effect on agriculture and we want to help people. I know that probably sounds cliche, but I mean, it's completely honest. That's what me and Kelly feel strongly about that. Money does not drive us. We make enough off YouTube and acres and whatever to live a relatively comfortable life, but it's not anything we're ever going to get rich off of. Our channel only reaches a very limited target audience that's really never going to blow up like some of your other ag channels because our audience is so targeted. But we want to have a positive influence and help people out. And that's the motivating factor. And if I can, make enough money off of it to live comfortably, especially in times when like farming is struggling like it is right now, that's only a side benefit of it.
For sure. No, that's great.
And how I find the time, to this day, I still don't know how I find the time. I just seem to do. I mean, it requires a lot of late nights at the office. It requires a lot of texts from Kelly saying, "Hey, when you going to be home? Why are you making a video today? I mean, you just out there last night and stuff." And it does require a lot of sacrifice. And, to be honest, I very rarely watch TV myself. I just don't have time between, running a farm and, the social media stuff that we do. I mean, I'm at work, I'm editing, I go home, I eat, take a shower, go to bed pretty much 7 days a week, except for that seventh day, we go to church and hopefully I don't have to make a video that Sunday afternoon and I can take a Sunday afternoon off, but that only happens a few times out of the year.
Sure. Sure. No, Matt. Well, like I said, I really appreciate the conversation today. As we kind of get to rounding this out, is there any kind of closing comments? And we covered a pretty big area here today. Anything that's been on your mind lately that you'd like to share with the audience?
I'd say one of the things that's really been laid on my heart here recently is in order for farmers to survive this, we've got to change our mindset. For years, it's been pounded into our heads that we measure success as a farmer by one thing: yield. If you're not making more yield this year than you did last year, you're not becoming a better farmer. You're not a good farmer. It's just been pounded into our heads that yield is the one measuring stick that we measure success by. We become dang good at that, and now it's led to, these low commodity prices. We're doing too good of a job. We're producing too much. We need to change our mindset that we need to judge our success by a different set of metrics. How much money do we make? Instead of shooting for top yield, we need to be shooting for top profit, whatever we need to change in our operation. And we need to become comfortable with the fact that I can make less yield and still consider myself to be a good farmer and a successful farmer, especially if that leads towards me having more money in my bank account at the end of the year.
Yeah, and I guess I'll kind of echo that because you talk about how we measure success. And the two things that come to mind with for me is you talk about yield, but then also I'm going to go back to kind of the old mentality that a lot of us were taught, trained, and conditioned by is hard work and the number of hours that we work at the end of the day. And so both of those are kind of two mindset shifts that I think a guy needs to have or adapt at some point. And back to the point where I feel like at least the way that I grew up is you were taught and almost trained to value the number of hours that you work more than what's actually in your bank account. That could be said about the yield that we're shooting for. Everybody talks about yield. Everybody talks about yield. And nobody talks about profit at the end of the day, probably partially because we don't know what it is. You know what I mean? So it's kind of twofold there. But I can't echo that enough, how a guy needs to kind of adapt that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, even this winter, I've gone to countless meetings, seed meetings, chemical meetings, and stuff. And all these salesmen, look, I know these salesmen have got a job to do. They got a family to feed. They got a kid to send to college. And the only way they make money is if they sell product. But they're still pounding. Our product gets you more yield. Our project has an ROI. Who does it have an ROI for? Myself or your company that's actually making the product? It's going to have a lot bigger ROI for your company than what it is me. And there's still pounding yield out there. And as a farmer, that's what we've been conditioned to believe. And we've got to break that mindset. There's no telling how many salesmen I've never met before and I've never heard their products have messaged me this year about, hey, want to try their product out. And they want to throw out the fancy term ROI. And I try to be polite with these people. I'm like, that's not the way I farm. I'm looking to use less products. I'm not looking to add more products to my portfolio. I'm looking to save money and focus on the things that I know work for a fact on my farm. And I know farmers need to be smarter about the decisions they make, about how they listen to these sales pitches and look at things from a business sense rather than an agronomic sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess while we're talking about that, just 2 minutes, explain how you've been able to, and I think the word discipline comes to mind for me when it comes to different products that we try, disciplined and, creating a budget to start the year and, trying to stick to that. Because at the end of the day, we can't hide the fact that we still get paid off of yield. And, so that's a big part of the factor, right? But then how do you make sure that we're not just, okay, well, this product, it's been proven, so we're going to try it, you know what I mean? So there's 100 different products out there that can all get you 5 to 10 bushels and they all cost $15 to $20, you know what I mean? And so we all think that we can try them and we're going to be an extra 100 bushels in our pocket, that's not the case. So how do you stay disciplined in some of the different products that you try? Do you have like a small research that you try some on that prove tried and true? Or how do you kind of make some of those decisions? Because I'm curious even for our own farm.
I mean, first thing I'll do before I use a product large scale, unless it's like a herbicide or something, I mean, you don't have to do replicated tests, but if it's a fertilizer additive, which have become hugely popular, if it's a biological, if it's some kind of a biostimulant, before I even think about using it large scale, I'm going to put in a replicated trial on my farm and I'm going to test it multiple years before it goes into our portfolio. I'll automatically go into it with a mindset of it costs more than $10 and it's not actually a fertilizer product that I know the analysis of. If it's not seed that I know is going to germinate and grow, if it's not an actual herbicide, a chemical compound or a fungicide or an insecticide that I know for sure is going to do a job, if it's some of this other stuff that may or may not provide a benefit, but it's not necessarily providing something specific. If it costs more than $10 an acre, I'm automatically discounting it. I might test it but I'm already of the opinion that this thing is probably going to be snake oil. It's designed to create an ROI for the person manufacturing it. If it does actually work on my farm, the return on investment is going to be so minuscule, it's really not even going to be worth it to me. So there's enough products out there that are cheap that can provide, real benefit to your farm that if it's one of those high dollar ones, like I'll test it just to prove to myself whether it works or it doesn't work. But the chances of it actually going in my portfolio are actually slim to none.
That's interesting. And I think we could all do more of that. And even on our farm, I mean, it was just, you see one of those deals where it's like, oh, it sounds pretty good. And we've got good trials from elsewhere, but we don't do enough research on our own farm.
I'll go ahead and tell you and everybody else out there the one single piece of equipment out there that's got the best ROI. Now, I'll throw that term out there, ROI. The one piece of equipment that will make you the most money is having a scale on your grain cart.
Yeah. Yeah.
That way you can put in replicated strips yourself and you can find out whether a product works or not, how much money it's actually making. And I love all forms of testing, but guys that go out there and just split a field, I mean, you might really learn something, but you're not isolating the variables. There's too many variables out there to really make a good scientific determination on if something worked or not. And just putting one side by side, treated versus untreated, one test, that's not a good scientific test. You can make bad judgment calls based on the data of that one test. The only way to really do it and really know for a fact whether something is paying off or not is to do, replicated tests. The minimum amount of times I will replicate a product in a test is 4 times because there could be other variables out there that I'm not able to isolate or account for. If I've got the space, I'd much rather do 5 replications. But I know me personally, I've based so many decisions that have actually been wrong just based on maybe trying a product on one field and like, oh, it looks like it did pretty good on this field, or I'm seeing something a little better on this field that I didn't do other fields, but it was due to something completely unrelated to the product that I tried. There's no telling how many countless dollars I've lost by making decisions based on evidence like that.
And I think we have a fear that it's going to be the other way around, if that makes sense, to where like we're going to maybe miss out on something if we don't try all these trials and miss out on that extra yield that we keep focusing on, or miss out on yield if we pull things out that we think work and maybe don't. I mean, there's so much fear around that, and that's definitely just kind of goes back to the mindset side.
Yeah, you just said it better than I could ever hope to say. Exactly right. We're scared of missing out on that few bushels in that one year because we either don't put something in or we leave something out.
For sure, for sure. And I'll echo on the grain cart thing. The only thing I'd add to that, and this is personal experience, but have a grain cart scale that's like, so we use what it's called Libre grain cart scale. It's a Bluetooth scale, and so it helps for a recording side of things. And I'll just say from the insurance standpoint, that has been a game changer. If you have any sort of insurance that pays out, that's going to be a huge one that's going to pay pretty fast. So just wanted to throw that in there.
So also, let me echo off of that because I actually experienced this year. We had insurance claims and everything. We don't have any delivery tickets because every bit of grain that we harvest goes into our grain bins. But we've got scales on our grain carts, and we're still old school. We're not Bluetooth. We got a notepad in the tractor where Kelly's writing down the weights and she gives it to the truck driver. And the truck driver's keeping track of how many bushels go on each farm and go into the grain bins. But when we're filing that insurance claim, I told them, we weigh every load off of every farm. Well, and they were asking me, well, you take it to a certified scale? No, we got scales on our grain carts. Oh, you got scales on your grain carts. Have you calibrated them? Like, yeah, I calibrated them years ago. Well, I need those calibration tickets. And I hadn't done it, but then I got thinking, fortunately, we had also custom harvested a small farm for somebody, and he wanted to know exactly how much came off each individual field on his farm. So I wrote down all those weights, but then we delivered it to the granary and I had actual scale tickets. So if we didn't have that, they probably would have based my payment based on measuring the level in the grain bin, which is
Right.
crazy that they think that that's going to be accurate. But so, yeah, if you got grain carts, by all means, do a calibration load. and keep the record of that calibration load.
Yeah, for sure. And I know the handwrittens, and that's awesome. We went to basically the Bluetooth because it takes out some of the human error that was caused by some of us. So that's great. So no, I guess I appreciate you even kind of diving into that because I think there's a lot of value in kind of shifting that mindset around the yield side. So, as we kind of get to wrapping this up today, I want to be respectful of your time. So you can get back to, editing videos. Anything else that you'd like to kind of touch on, or at least let people know where they can find you, follow along, see what your journey's been, see the current videos you got you coming out, or where can people find you?
You can find either me or Kelly on multiple platforms. I mean, obviously, our bread and butter is YouTube. Search Griggs Farms LLC on YouTube. We'll pop up. You can also find us on Facebook. I'm under my own name on Facebook, Matt Griggs, and then Kelly Griggs has got her own Facebook. Kelly is one that's on Instagram. I think it's Griggs Farms TN is her handle on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I'm starting to explore that world a little bit. Search Matt Griggs under there. And then you can also find us on Acres TV. We've got our own channel on there, Griggs Farms, obviously. And, the stuff on Acres TV is the exact same stuff on YouTube. It's just delayed a few days. But if you want to watch something completely ad-free, just watch the content on Acres. You just got to wait a few extra days to see it.
Sure. No, that's great. And I saw you got a website too. And I was breezing through that. I mean, man, that was pretty awesome just to have a website to come back to where people can kind of see you there, and got some history on there and a lot of data on there as well.
Yeah, I mean, all the research that we do, the replicated trials, we've got it on our website. The spreadsheets I was talking about, they're obviously geared and tailored toward me, but a lot of other people have found good use out of the spreadsheets, at least using it as like a rough draft and then modifying it to suit their own needs. And of course, our rich history got it on our website, but our website is www.griggsfarmsllc.com. So we don't update it near as much like we do social media, but it does have a lot of good relevant data on there.
Sure. No, that's great. That's great. Well, like I said, listeners, I appreciate you listening today. I appreciate Matt for taking the time here today. And if there's anything that kind of strikes home for you, or something that you found really relatable, go follow him. Go check out all the fun things that they're doing. Or if there's things even on the, initially when I kind of wanted to record this, it was kind of on the business side, kind of focusing on what we can do to kind of improve that. That's what we try to focus on here is the pioneer mindset, pioneering that new mindset so we can pave our own path, right? And so anybody that's wants to kind of hit me up on that, or kind of reach out to either Pioneer Farmer or Pioneer Mindset, be happy to have that conversation, how we can help you with the business side of things as well. Kind of going back to the spreadsheet, seeing if there's things that we can help you out there. But anyways, Matt, I appreciate today's conversation. Look forward to maybe talking in the future. And thanks again for your time.
Appreciate it, Garrett. Good talking with you.
Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share, or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram at Garrett Ruskamp, or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.